we're also learning tonight Lilu Nishmat Naomi Bat Rivka and Refuah Shlema to Rafal Ben Frida. So, first of all, Mazal Tov for whoever here finished the 613 mitzvot. Give yourself a round of applause. That's amazing. That was the easy part. Now you got to do it. That was the harder part. Just learning about it. The instructions is the easy part. Building the shelves, building the unit, that's the hard part. So we'll discuss a little bit about the 613 mitzvot, 613 commandments. Get a little bit of a better understanding on why we need to learn the 613 commandments, and also to understand why we have 613 commandments. So, I get questions asked to me all the time. It makes my life really interesting. That one of the questions that are fairly common is, what's with all the commandments? Why do we have so many commandments? Are you talking about 613? That's a lot of commandments. You look at any other religion, you could count it usually on your hands and feet, and somebody else's hands and feet, maybe tops, on how many commandments there are over there. You talk about Judaism, even think about, let's say, something as simple as a sukkah. Not only do we have 630 commandments, but now we have about 1,000 subcategories. So you're building a sukkah. How big the sukkah can be. Can be too big, can be too small. How high is it going to be? Can't be too high, can't be too short. How many holes is the walls moving? Is the walls shaking? What type of roof are you going to have? The easiest way to understand, and how, if you really know about the mitzvot, is when you think about it, imagine trying to explain it to a non-Jew. So imagine, and I've done this, like imagine a guy, being that we're speaking about Sukkot, imagine a non-Jew comes over to you, you're holding your lulav, your etrog, your hadasim, and avravot, and he comes over to you and you'd be like, so what's with the spear? What are you doing with this thing? So you start explaining to him, well, this is from a palm branch, and this is a citrus food, and this is, that fruit, and this, so on and so forth. And then, let's say he'll start asking you, simple questions. Like, how much does this cost? How much does that cost? And you're holding a lemon, right? And you tell him, some people pay hundreds of dollars for the lemon. And you'll say, this is a $150 lemon. You'd be like, are you out of your mind? Like, what's the difference between this lemon and that lemon? And you really try, and then you even try to dare to explain to him, well, listen, if it's beautiful, it's worth a lot more. He's like, what is this, a diamond? Like, what are you talking about beautiful? It's the clarity in it, the color in it, the size in it, the shape in it, just like a diamond. That's why the talk is. So when you're saying that we have 613 mitzvot, we have 613 categories. And then we have add a comma and then a few zeros, and that's how many mitzvot that you could possibly put into place over here. So when you think about it, why do we have it? And the question that I get asked fairly often is, what's up with all the commandments? Like, why does God want us to do so many stuff? Like, why can't it just be simpler? Just be a good person, say thank you, say I'm sorry, do the good spiel, and that's it. Why do we have to have so many commandments? The interesting thing is, who asks me those types of questions? So I'll give you two options. Number one, somebody who was never religious before. All of a sudden decides he wants to become religious, wants to become more about Judaism, and then you come in and then you give him a manifesto of all the laws that he has to do now, or she has to do now. And then you're going to have to do all this stuff. That's option one. Option two is somebody that's been religious his entire life. And that's it. He's just been religious his entire life. Who do you think is going to ask the question, why do we have so many laws, so many regulations, so many obligations, in the Torah as compared to other religions? You would say the one that's new. The answer is no. It's weird. It's not that. It's not the one that have been around with the religion. You know who asked the questions? The Jews that have been Jews since day one. All of a sudden, they want to know why. Why do we have to do so many things? Really, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if I have a key in my packet on Shabbat or I don't have a key. Is it catering? Is it really going to make a difference if my lemon is a little bit blemished? Is it going to make a difference if my sukkah walls are shaking a little bit? Is it going to make a difference if my skirt is going to be a little too high? Is God really going to care? Is it really going to be the end of the world? So the questions that usually get asked is usually from the aspect of people that are religious. And it's a good question. Why did God give us so many commandments? Very, very imperative. So we'll discuss some reasons and some understandings of what is the purpose of all these things. Number one, we know that the mitzvot, what they do is they make us better people. Whether you like it or not, if you're listening to the Torah, it's going to make you a better person. Just look at the simple thing. You're not allowed to get angry according to the Torah. You know how big of a sin is anger? If you're an angry person, if someone gets angry, it's as if you worshipped idols. Somebody that worship idols, that's one of the big three commandments. That's not something simple. Not only are you not allowed to get angry, you're not supposed to be stingy, you're supposed to be nice, you're supposed to be kind, you're supposed to visit the sick, you're supposed to be a good husband, you're supposed to be a good wife, you're supposed to be, there's lists and lists that go on to make you a better person. So the commandments, first and foremost, is to make you a better person. And it really does. It really does. If you're, I had a couple, I said this over quite some time, where the man became more religious and the wife, they both started off, they weren't religious. The man became more religious and the wife was very against it. She was like, what are you bringing with this? All of a sudden we have to do with this God, yada, 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 all these obligations. She wasn't into it. He used to come to my classes. A short while goes by, and she starts coming to my classes. And then she was telling, and she mentioned it to me, and she said, at the beginning, I was very against it. So I said, what changed? What all of a sudden changed from being against the religion to all of a sudden keeping and observing the religion? And she says, what can I tell you? My husband started being a nicer person. He got angrier less. He started treating me better. I said, if this is what religion does, then, I want a piece of it. It must be something good going on. And by the way, people that dress religious doesn't always mean that they are religious. Really what's going on in here. If you really act according to the laws of the Torah, then yes, you're going to be a better person. But not only that the Torah is making you a better person, your thinking is going to be different as well. The way that the mitzvot work, there is, you can think of two things like you have obligations and you have rights. This is Rabbi Akiva Tatz speaks about this, in depth. I'll give you an example like this. So this is my phone, right? And it's my right that I have this phone. It's your obligation not to take my phone. Now, if you take my phone, now I have a right to get that back. I have to go through court and yada, 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 the whole thing. There's two aspects here that we have to focus on. There's obligations and there is rights. So I have a right to my property. Your obligation is not to infringe on my right. Your obligation is not to come onto my property. Now, what is very, very important is where is your outlook in life? The Medrash Tanchuma in Parashat Noach brings down that there was Alexander the Great. He went to visit a far-off province and he wanted to see how they judge their cases. And I'm sorry, it was Medrash Rabbah, not a Medrash Tanchuma. He goes and they're going to see how they go and how they judge their cases. And they're going, and he walks in, there's a court case going on. What is the court case? There's person A bought a field from person B. And person A, while he was plowing his field, he found a treasure underground. And they found this treasure, they took the treasure, and they brought it to the king. Now, what was the argument? The person that bought the field said, hey, listen, I bought the field. I didn't buy the treasure. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the guy that I bought it from. And the other guy said, no. It says, I sold him the field. Everything belongs to him. It doesn't belong to me. So two people are focusing on that. So what did the king in that country do? He said, do you have a son? They said, yes. Do you have a daughter? Yes. Mazal tov, shiduch. Right? And they said, who's going to share the money? The children are going to go and they're going to share the money. So Alexander was looking at this and he was shocked. And the king turned over to him and says, what, you would have done it differently? And the guy said, yeah, said, of course. Said, what would you have done? So I would have murdered both of them and taken the money from myself. And, and there's a lot to speak about this Midrash and how we understand it. He wasn't, Alexander the Great wasn't, an imbecile. He knew, he had some brains. But what the interesting factor to think about is the people in this far-off province, they were not looking at their rights. They were looking at their obligation. What is my obligation for the other person? And from Alexander Macedonia says, it's my right. I'm able to do this, I'm taking it. So there's two aspects that you can look at it, your obligations and your rights. Now, how important it is, you can see in relationships. You look at, for example, between a husband and a wife. So a husband works hard all day and he comes home and he says, listen, I want a clean house, I want warm food, I want this and this and this, has a whole thing. And the wife goes and says, listen, I work hard also, and I work, and then I clean the house, and then I put the warm food, and then I put the kids to sleep. I want, a diamond ring, a vacation, another car, and they have a list. Now, when each spouse is looking at what is my right, I have a right to a warm meal, I have a right to have a diamond ring, I have a right for a vacation, then all you're thinking about is yourself. This is where my circle is, it's right over here. But if you stop for a second and think about it, instead of thinking, what do I need to get? What is my right? Think about, what is my obligation? What is my obligation for my spouse? So instead of thinking, oh, hey, I deserve this, I deserve this, what does the other person want? So instead of the wife saying, I need this, I need this, I need this, she says, what does my husband need? What does my husband need? And the husband saying, well, instead of I'm thinking about what I need, what does my wife need? Now that is the difference between focusing between rights and focusing between obligations. When you're looking at civil law, when you're looking at the laws of the states of almost any democracy, it's focused on rights. It says, okay, you have the right to this property. He took that right away from you. You have to go and you have the right to, so on and so forth and get it back, whatever, the methods that you want to pursue. The Torah doesn't look at it as rights. The Torah's mitzvot, the Torah's commandments is on your obligation. You have an obligation that if you find a lost object, you have to return it to your friend. You have an obligation not to get married. You have an obligation not to say Lashon Hara. The focus is very, very subtle, but very, very different. The focus is not becoming just a good person because I'm not supposed to get angry because whatever. Your focus is because you're not supposed to get angry, period. Not because, there's I don't know if they still have it, but at one point they had these things called the scream rooms, where people would get very, very frustrated and angry, and they just want to scream. So they go to a place, they pay them some money, and they put this padded, cushioned room, and they just scream and run into the walls and break things or whatever to release your stress, to release your anger. But they don't realize it's the opposite. The more that you feed into the anger you're going to get. Then it's going to happen. You're not going to have cushion. It's going to be in your home, and you're going to start screaming like you're used to screaming. But whatever the case is, it's the idea of where the focus is at. If your focus is on your right, you're doomed for failure. If your focus is on your obligation, then you're going for success. So the Torah's commandments, their focus is to change the way that you think. You no longer think about your rights. Now you're thinking about your obligation rather than your rights. So that was, and there was once a story that there was once a man who did a very, very big favor for a big rabbi. And the rabbi gave him a crazy ultimatum. He says, listen, I'll give you two options. You did me this huge favor, you have two options. Number one, when you get up in the next world, you're sitting right next to me. And this was a big rabbi, a real one, like a yeah. So you're saying he's sitting right next to some rabbis. I tell you that it's it depends. Some of them are up, some of them are down. But this one is going very, very high up. This is a legit rabbi. You're sitting over there. You're sitting right on the top. You're sitting on top of the pyramid in the next world. That's option number one. For the most people, the second he says, listen, you don't have to tell me option number two. I'm taking door number one. It doesn't matter what you're gonna say. Option number two was, I'll bless you for a lot of wealth. So he thinks about it, he goes back to the rabbi, he says, Rabbi, I'll take option number two. Now this is a guy who's a chassid, who's someone who knows the value of the olam haba, knows the value of Gan Eden, knows what he's talking about, and he still chose the wealth. And the rabbi says, fine, give him the blessing. So the chassidim, his friends, will go over to him and says, what are you, crazy? You had the opportunity to sit next to the greatest rabbi in olam haba, and you gave it up for some money? So he said, yeah. He says, what benefit would it do for me to sit in olam haba? Who it would help? It would help me. It would help me that I would be able to sit in olam haba. That's very nice. He says, but that's not going to help anybody else. But if I have money, I'm going to be able to help everybody else. So there's two ways that I could think about it. Here I'm going to help myself, or I'm going to go and I can help other people. He says, I decided that I'd rather help other people than help myself. Now, that is a very high level. To get to that level, to think that you are on that level. Some people say, yeah, of course. And I've asked this question before to people, you have two options. You could either have, it used to be Bill Gates' life, but now it's Jeff Bezos' life. So if you have Jeff Bezos' life, and you have this world and the next world of Jeff Bezos at this stage in your life. Follow this question. Yeah, this stage of your life, you have, Jeff Bezos, who's worth over 100, I don't know what, he dips and ups and downs, loses 14 billion, gains 14 billion, whatever he is, right? He, if someone has enough to lose 14 billion, then, at least they have that, right? So he's in that level. You have $100 billion in the bank, or you have, let's say, the life of Chacham Ovadia Yosef. Now, what would you choose? Now, I've asked this to many people, and people contemplate and say, okay, Chacham Ovadia Yosef, so, and then they say, there's only Jews. They'll be like, okay, at what stage is Chacham Ovadia Yosef's life? What are we talking about over here? Are we talking about the end, the beginning? Once you're starting to dig into it. But a lot of them said, yeah, I'll take the money of Jeff Bezos, and then I'll support all the yeshivot and all the things and everything else like that. But, that's true and that's very good. But when you think about it, what is the source? Is the source really because you want to help somebody else? Or the source is you want to help yourself? I'll just leave myself 20 billion in the bank, and then everybody else could get, the other thing. So is your source yourself, or is your source others? What the Torah's objectives is, what the Torah says when you're learning the commandments, you're learning the mitzvot, is not anymore about you, it's about somebody else. It's thinking about others. So that is number two. Number three, the reason why we have the mitzvot is we know we have a relationship with God. There's a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, how do you get into this relationship? One of the things is that we know, it says in Bereshit that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created us b'tzelem Elokim, in His image. Now, what that means is just like the Midrashim go and speak about it, just like God is merciful, you're merciful. God visits the sick, you visit the sick. God does chesed, you do chesed. And each case is different case in the Torah, which brings the mitzvot, shows you what God did, and then we emulate God's ways. By emulating God's ways, we build a sort of a relationship, towards it. Now, think of this, scenario. There is, I was actually searching what's the most expensive hotel in the world. the hotel room. If you want to book a hotel room. So all the women, please cover your ears. Yeah, it's just there's like one hotel room in Switzerland that's $90,000 a night. $90,000 a night, one room. Well, it's not. It's a suite. So, and there's one, but I was checking. There's one in New York City. It's called the Mark Hotel. They have the presidential suite. You're talking about a 10,000 square foot suite with, I don't know how many bedrooms and a 2,500 square foot terrace. A very, very nice do. $75,000 a night.
Oh, remember?
Remember, it's happening next anniversary. They imagine, a husband goes and takes his wife over there for a week. Right? So it goes over there, for a week. But instead of just going into this most expensive, most fanciest hotel, what he does is he spends an extra, few $100s, few $1,000s, and let's call it bedazzles the place up. He puts stuff in there, like he gets an artist to come in there and to draw with rose petals on the bed, let's say, I don't know, something memorable between them. Or like puts different types of little personal, like a personalized gift in there. And this could be your imagination, could be anything. It could be, I don't know, her face painted on a seashell. Doesn't matter. Whatever it is, anything that will feel, but something personal. Something personal in it. Now, when she's going to go back and she's going to remember, that type of vacation, what's she going to remember? She's going to remember the 10,000 square foot apartment, or is she going to remember what those extra few $100s or few $1,000s that the husband did, that personalized, those extra little details. Those extra little details are going to go a lot further than anything else. That's why let's say you buy, your wife a very expensive diamond ring, that's amazing. But imagine if you personalize that ring. Personalize it with something just you and your wife know. There's a connection, there's words, I don't know, but whatever it is, that when you make it personal, that just took it from being worth a few $1,000s to, just add a few zeros to it. Because the personal details make it so much more, make it worth so much more. And that is why a lot of women, for example, if they, God forbid, they lose their wedding band, they get very upset. Why? It's their wedding band. Okay, just buy you another one. It's $100. What's the difference? No, but it symbolizes something. This is what. So the personal details go a lot further than the actual object itself. Now, when God gave us the commandments, so you think about it this way. You have, let's say, you could buy an etrog. Right? When we started speaking about etrog, you can buy an etrog, you buy a good one, a kosher one, let's say for $30. But then you could buy even a better one. You could personalize it, make it even a little bit better for $60. So all of a sudden, that not only takes that mitzvah and puts it into a personal, the details is what I'm trying to say, the details of the mitzvot, 630 mitzvot, yeah, but the details is what make it personalized. All of a sudden, it's not 630, but it's something that it's a little bit extra that makes that $1,000 mitzvah worth now $10,000 or $100,000. The same idea is, there are people. A good relationship means that both people want to be in that relationship. If two people do not want to be in that relationship, if either one of them doesn't want to be in that relationship, it's done. There's nothing even to discuss anymore. When two people want to be in it, there's so much room for success. The second that one falls out, that's it. It's doomed for failure. When you're doing a mitzvah, and when you're adding your own personal touch, so you could have gotten a $30, talk and it's fine. But you put in your own personal thing in there, all of a sudden that shows you, I'm not doing this because I have to. I'm doing this because I want to. I know that you needed to learn Torah, and you go and you learn, go to Shiur Torah, whatever it is that you go, and you're learning for an hour. And then what happens? The second that the rabbi says, brings the speech, B'ezrat Hashem, B'Mashiach, people always know the end of the speech, right? Whatever it is, it goes, they say that, all of a sudden they're excited, and they leave out. The people, you want to show that you really wanted it, you stay that extra 1 minute. Open up a sefer. You're finished praying. Instead of just rushing right out, say one parak of Tehillim. Show God, listen, I did what I had to do. I'm doing this now because I want to do it. It puts a personalization into it that makes it so worth so much more. Usually I never have to go so far for my drink. It's like there's such a gap of time. Okay, so I want to share with you something that Rabbi Mordechai Becher brings down in his book Gateway to Judaism. He says, imagine somebody goes and decides he wants to be a vegetarian. He wants to become a vegetarian, meaning no meat. He's like so sick of people going and hurting the animals, and the animals are suffering. He says, that's it. No more suffering for the animals. So he says, no, he cuts meat out of his diet. And he wakes up the next morning, he says, no more meat. And he looks at his shoes, and he sees his shoes are made out of leather. So now he has to think, okay, am I going to get rid of these shoes now? It's leather, it's the animals, He says, you know what? I already bought it. The animal's already dead. Okay, I'll wear the shoes, But from now on, no more leather. And then he's putting on his pants and he sees his leather belt. And he says, okay, again, the same thing. Okay, the animal's dead already. I bought the belt already. But from now on, no more leather belt. And he's going through the process. And then it comes breakfast time and he's hungry. And he decides he's going to, he's going to go out to the restaurant to order some breakfast. He goes to the restaurant, he sits down over there, and he goes to the waiter and he says, waiter, what do you recommend? The waiter says, I'll give you, I recommend steak and eggs. Obviously, the story's not Jewish, obviously, because that would have been bagels and lox and cream cheese. But it depends if you're Sephardi, right? So the eggs. So he said, I'm going to go and I'm going to, he says, I recommend the steak and eggs over here is the best. So the guy said, listen, I would love to have the steak and eggs, but I'm a newly vowed, vegetarian. I can't. I don't like the animal suffering. There's no more. I'm not eating anything that had a face in it or went through any suffering. So he said, listen. He says, you don't have to worry. He says, our animals, they come from Happy Valley Ranch. This is where there's no gates. The animals roam freely. They can eat as much as they want. There's so much beer for them to drink. They drink as much as they want. Every hour every day they get a 1 hour massage, and there's no criticism. They only get compliments. They could go and they don't get killed. They don't get killed over there. They don't get shechted over there. The second that they die, they reach the ripe old age of whatever, they die, we bring them to the slaughterhouse and we chop them up and then we serve it. So no animals were hurt by this meat. He says, okay, so in that case, 2 please. And he gets 2 steaks and eggs. He's eating it. It's delicious. He doesn't feel guilty. Now he says, where am I ever going to find somewhere where I could buy such good steak, steak that it never hurt an animal? So he started, give me 10 to go. I'm going to put it in the freezer and save it for myself. He goes home. He puts it in his freezer. Now he realizes he has so much. He didn't have enough, he didn't think it properly. He says he doesn't have a big freezer. He says, you know what, I have some extra room. Let me invite my friends over. We'll make a barbecue. He goes out, he invites his friends over. That night they all come over there. He fires up the grill, and he's about to take out the steak. And then he's starting to think, he says, you know what? He says, if I'm going to start eating the steak, and my friends are going to start eating the steak, and tomorrow they're going to think about, oh, how awesome was that steak. Then they're going to go to the supermarket. They're going to buy steak, but they're not going to buy from the Happy Valley Ranch that I bought it from. They're going to buy the regular steak that, was brutally murdered at, its prime of its life and so on and so forth. He says, that this is a chassid, you're talking about, he's already thinking 6 steps ahead. He's like, what happens if it's going to be like this? It's going to be like, he says, you know what? I can't have it. No steak tonight. He throws all the meat out in the garbage. He feeds them, I don't know, corn, French fries, I don't know what it is, whatever it is. He feeds them something. And now it's ready night. Now it's ready night. Now he's hungry. He says he didn't have any steak. He says, you know what? Let me go out to the supermarket. Let me get something that's vegetarian friendly. So he goes to the supermarket. He's walking around the aisles. It's like he figures I'll go to the dairy section. Dairy, that's no animals harmed in that. He puts his wagon. He didn't know about this yet. So he puts his wagon. He travels to the dairy section, and he starts putting in cheese and eggs and not eggs, cheese and all these different types of different dairy products. A woman passes by him and she says, you must like dairy a lot, because all he had in his cart was dairy. And he says, to be honest, not really. He says, but I'm a vegetarian and I don't like harming animals, and this is the only thing that I have left to eat. And she's like, do you know how they get so much milk out of the cows? He says, as soon as the calf is born, and the calf, once it finishes, needing the mother's milk, they inject it with hormones, the mother, so that it will continue producing milk, so that it'll be able to continue using it. He says, you know how much animals were harmed producing so much milk? He's like, oh, yeah. He takes everything, puts it right back over there. He's like, what am I going to do? And he's walking back and forth. He says, you know what? He's going to go and he's going to find those protein bars. Those protein bars are like this big. They weigh about 15 pounds. Taste like sand, right? They have so he goes and he's like, this is how I'll live. He takes a protein bar, starts piling it. He says, let me check the ingredients. He looks in the ingredients. He sees animal fat. He sees there are certain dyes from the red beetle that they take from, to make it, to make the red color. And he's like, you gotta be kidding me. He puts this back and he's starting to cry. He's like that. You know how you get hungry and cranky. He's like crying over here. Meanwhile, his phone rings. He answers his phone. It's his grandmother. His grandmother, who lives around the corner from the supermarket. He says, listen, why don't you come over? You haven't visited me in a while. I'll make you some supper. And he's like, you know what? Fine, Grandma. I'll come visit you. Hangs up the phone, puts the empty shopping cart back, and depressed, he walks to his grandmother's house. He gets to his grandmother's house, and his grandmother just fried a delicious schnitzel for him, and he's sitting over there. Now he's thinking, he's like, if I tell my grandmother that I can't eat, that's like hitting your grandmother in the face with a fist, not a regular fist. When you have those brass knuckles. Like if you go to your grandmother's house, your grandparents' house, and say, no, I'm not going to eat anything, that's like a death sentence over there. He's like, but he says at one point, if I'm going to go and tell my grandmother that I'm not going to eat from her food, I'm going to hurt her. But if I eat her food, then I'm hurting the animals. So now whose pain is more important? My grandmother's pain or the animal's pain? What is going to be more important? Now, imagine, we went through one day of this guy's life. Imagine what this guy is going to have to go through his entire life thinking as a vegetarian. He's going to have to make a lot of laws and regulations of what is allowed, what is not allowed, what is okay and what is not okay. Now imagine a whole nation together decides that they're going to go and they're going to all be vegetarians. They're going to need something probably, we call it a Talmud maybe, I don't know. They'll need a book of laws to describe to them what they need to do. So we look at our book of laws, we look at we had 630 commandments. But a commandment, let's say, be a vegetarian, is not enough to be a vegetarian. You have to know when can you be a vegetarian, when you're not going to be a vegetarian, what is okay, what is not okay. So of course the 613 really has more details for it, but that's just learning how to keep that single detail that it originated from. So the Maharal asks, thank you, may be blessed with many, many blessings. So, easiest blessing to give, right? So, thank you. So, the Maharal asks a question like this. The Maharal says, we know that the more commandments that we have, you should know that if you have a positive commandment and you don't fulfill that positive commandment, that is a sin. You have to, if you have a positive commandment, you have an obligation to fulfill that positive commandment. So, for example, you have to put on tefillin. If you don't pull on a tefillin, that's a sin. That's not just enough to say, okay, I didn't do an extra thing. No. You went backwards. You did actual sin. So this is the Maharal asks an interesting question. Wouldn't it make more sense to make less mitzvot? Because this way, it will be less of a chance that we would fall. If we have more mitzvot, we'll have more chances that we'll fall. So maybe it will be better to put less mitzvot. I don't know, instead of 613, give us 300. Cut it in half. Give us 300. This way, we'll have 300 opportunities to do good things, but also 313 less of mitzvot to fall. Does the question make sense? Says the Maharal, says that would make sense if it would be a 50-50 chance if you're going to do the mitzvah, if you're not going to do the mitzvah. But each Jew, when they're created, when a Jew is born, there is an affinity, there's an attraction to the mitzvah, which means is they want to do the mitzvah. Inside, you're connected to the mitzvah. You want to do the mitzvah. Sometimes there's a blockage, and sometimes, for some people, it's a wanting to do a mitzvah, and some people it's a wanting to possibly ever want to do a mitzvah. Depending on the type of person you are and the level that you are, but deep down, for some people, really deep down, they want to be good people. So, says the Maharal, says, the more commandments that we have, the more opportunities that we have to go, and it's not going to be more at the fall. No, because the opposite. We're more attracted to the growth that we have it. This is, there was once a wealthy merchant that, his son was getting, older, and he wanted to teach his son business. So he calls over his son. He says, "Listen, I'm going to give you, he gave him a stash of money, a nice amount of money." He says, "Go to your uncle lives in a far off province. Go over there. They have good merchandise over there. I want you to buy the merchandise. Learn the business ropes. Buy high, don't do that. Buy low, sell high. Buy high, whatever. If you're a baker's employer, then maybe." So he said, "Go and buy product and go and sell it, in a different place for a price." So I said, "Fine." He gives him the money. He makes it travel. He travels out there. He gets to his uncle. He gets to the place where his uncle. He books into a hotel. He goes right over to his uncle to introduce. Say, "Hi, I'm here. I'm coming to do business. My father sent me and gave me some money." The uncle says, "Not a problem." He makes phone calls nonstop. He says the second that he hears about this, he calls the merchant and says, "You don't understand. There's a wealthy guy that just came here. He wants to buy business. You better run over there to sell your merchandise." And he calls everybody that he knows to go and sell merchandise to his nephew. The nephew goes back to his hotel room. He's back to his hotel room. There's already a line of merchants out the door. They're sitting over there, and he's like, "Wow." He says, "Okay." He goes, he opens it up. They're coming in and buy this and this, and he's handling the prices, and he's going back and forth. He's negotiating, and he's there for 3 days, day in and day out, from morning until night. He's buying merchandise. He's negotiating. He's doing all these things. Finally, it comes to the point of time that he had no more money left. He bought everything that he had the ability to buy. He only had enough money left now to get the trip back home. So he tells the merchant, says, "I'm sorry, business is closed. I'm done. I have enough merchandise." And he goes to bid, farewell to his uncle. He goes to his uncle, and his uncle says, "So, did you enjoy your visit in here? In this, you never came to visit over here. It's a beautiful country, beautiful place. You enjoy yourself." He says, "To be honest," he says, "I didn't have a second to myself. I didn't even have a chance to go and see the sights. I didn't have a chance to go and taste the food over here. I didn't have a chance for anything." So the uncle smiled and says, "I know." He says, "I did that on purpose." He says, I know your personality. And he says, and if you would have gone, and if you would have, hung around a little bit, he says, you would have gone over here, and then you would have found the painting, and you'd be like, oh, the art over here is, and then you would have taken this, then you would have bought the food over here, then you would have souvenir over here. Before you know it, you would have been out of money without any merchandise. He says, that's why I kept you busy from morning until night, that you didn't have the opportunity to go and enjoy the land, because I knew if you would, you wouldn't have be able to buy any merchandise. Says the Dubba Magen. He says that God knows us. God knows each and every one of us. And God says there's 630 commandments. You realize the second that you finish one commandment, there's another commandment you got to do. The second you finish that, there's another one you got to do. I'll be like, God, just give me 5 minutes of rest, please, for crying out. Just give me. God says, I know you. It says, if I would let you rest, if I wouldn't give you all these commandments, then what would you do? We know the purpose of life is not to just sit over here and do business and go on vacations. That's not the purpose of life. There's more to us. The purpose of life is that we should do the commandments, that we get closer to God. For ultimately, the real purpose of this world is for the next world. And says God, if I would have given you a few commandments, if I would have cut it in half and given you 300 commandments, then you would have wasted some time over here, wasted some time over here, and before you know it, 120 comes and you would come up there with no merchandise with you. It says in Divinity, it says that's why God gave us so many commandments. He gave us so many commandments because He knows us and He knows our ability. He says He didn't want us to waste a second. We're not wasting a second. Now we're going to know we're going to be able to buy good merchandise. The Rambam goes and says that this is something very important, because the Rambam says that it is important that every Jew is knowledgeable and learns all the 613 commandments, even though you realize majority of the commandments is not applicable to us. Says the Rambam, still it's important that each and every Jew goes and learns these commandments. And the question is why? Why is it so important for whoever was not a Kohen? Why is it so important to learn all these commandments? So, the pasuk in Bereshit, in Genesis, goes and says that when, in chapter 2, verse 15, it says that when God created the world, and there was no trees, before Adam HaRishon was created, the entire world looked like a desert. And what happened is that when Adam HaRishon was born, he saw there was nothing, he prayed to God for rain, and all of a sudden it rained and everything shot up instantly. So all the trees, everything shot up instantly. The question is, why is it that God waited until all of a sudden, that Adam HaRishon was, till he goes and he prays and he brings the rain and all the trees spread out? Says the pasuk, it says that, and I'll quote for you, no tree of the field was yet on the earth. And why? Because God did not bring rain, because there was no man to work the soil. Says the Zohar, what does it mean, no man to work the soil? To work it through the commandments, through the obligations. Adam had one. Adam had, don't eat from the Etz Hadas. But the Zohar says that the way that we work the land is through the Zohar. Says the Gemara. The Gemara in Chulin, page 60b, says that God waited specifically for Adam HaRishon to pray. Once he prayed for rain, that's when God made everything rain, and that's when God made everything sprout. The Nefesh HaChaim brings down, it says that when you do a commandment, when you do a mitzvah, it doesn't only affect you, it affects the universe. It affects the world. So people like to think and be like, okay, listen, I'll do a mitzvah, I'll do a sin, it'll affect me, what's the big deal? No, it doesn't work like that. When you do a positive commandment, and when you do a negative commandment, it affects the world around you. Forget about the fact that it affects each and every one of us, because Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lazeh. We're all connected. Each and every Jew is connected to each other. But besides that, it affects the world. Where do we see this? In Noach, in the flood. It says when the people in the generation of Noach, when they sinned, the earth itself was impure. That's why the whole world was put into a mikveh. The whole world had to be. That's why it was hot water, and everything had to be covered. Everything had to be dipped inside the water. Why? Because the earth in itself there was an impurity in it, and that leaked in from the man causing their sins. Now, so we know that mitzvot have an effect has an effect on the world, but it also has effect on you. We know there's 613 commandments. There is 365 negative commandments. This is a very famous idea. This is corresponding to the ligaments of a person's body. There's 248 positive commandments, and these are corresponding to the organs of the body. Now, what happens is that when you do a positive commandment, what you're doing is you're infusing that organ with life force. It's like spiritual life force. When you're doing a sin, that's taking out the life force from that organ. And every mitzvah has a different organ that is associated with it. When doing something, you're either nurturing it or you're either starving it and pulling it. That's why the Gemara in Brachot, page 18b says, Reshaim shebechayen koin metim. Wicked people, while they're alive, they're considered dead. Why are they considered dead? Why is the Gemara say they're dead? They're alive. They're walking around, they're doing their sins, they're going and they're causing problems. Why are they considered dead? They're considered dead because their life source is dead. They didn't nourish their souls. They didn't nourish their 248 positive, the limbs, the organs, and they didn't nourish the 365 ligaments. So they're dead in the sense that they did not nourish their spiritual life force. This is how we understand the Midrash, Tanchuma and Parshat Tazria, with Rabbi Akiva and Turnus Rufus. What happened is that this Turnus Rufus goes over to Rabbi Akiva, and he goes and he says to him, "What's better, deeds of man or deeds of God?" He asked him that type of question, a very famous midrash. And so if you're on the level of Rabbi Akiva, you realize he's asking. There's a follow-up question going on over there, and Rabbi Akiva realized that there's a follow-up question going up over there. So he said the deeds of man are greater. Just like shook him up, be like, well, like he had a whole plan. When you're in an argument and I'm like, okay, she's going to say this, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to say this, and you have like a whole list of things, and you're like, and you know what? And I can't believe it. And she's like, I'm sorry, what? But I have a whole chart of stuff that I was going to explain to you why you were wrong, and just like ruined it. So like if you go before you few steps ahead, Rabbi Akiva saw a few steps ahead. All of a sudden, Rabbi Akiva is going, and he says the deeds of man are greater than God. So Turnus Rufus says, what are you talking about over here? How do you say such a thing? Man's deeds are greater than God's? Are you kidding me? How is that even possible? So Rabbi Akiva goes and brings him two things. He brings him, on one hand, he brings him a cake. On the other hand, he brings him kernels of wheat. He says, hey, which one you want to eat? You want to eat the cake or you want to eat the kernels of wheat? So he had to admit that what's better? Really, the deeds of man are better, because you're not going to eat the kernels of wheat. You're going to eat the cake that's made by man, that it's crushed up the kernels, made into the flour, and turned into yada, 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 and so on and so forth. Those are the deeds of man. Turnus Rufus still said, no. Okay, fine. You know what? If God created you uncircumcised, why are you going uncircumcising yourself? Do you know better than God? If God created you one way, stay that way. Why are you going out of it? So Rabbi Akiva answers and says that God gave us the mitzvot so that we should be able to benefit, we should be able to fix ourselves. We fix ourselves. What does that mean? That we fix ourselves, perfect ourselves, and perfect the world? The idea is that we know, for example, using circumcision, the word that's used for circumcision is olah. Olah is like the extra skin. There's another time that the Torah speaks about olah is by Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Vani arel sfatayim." He says, "My lips are blocked." When he was talking to God, and God said to Moshe, "Moshe, why don't you go and get the Jews out?" He says, "I can't. I have a speech impediment." Says Moshe Rabbeinu to God. They're not going to listen to me. The word that he uses is arel, like olah, the same root of it. The reason is because olah is like a blockage. There's a blockage. God created you with a specific blockage, and you're going to go and you're going to fix that blockage, because that's the purpose of what you need to do. You fix it, and hence you're elevating yourself. You're elevating the world, and that's what happens with circumcision as well. It's not saying that God's world is deficient, but what you're doing is that you're enhancing it because you're becoming a part of it. Now we have an interesting question that we need to ask. So there is 613 commandments. Each commandment corresponds to a different part of the body. Now we have a big problem. Nowadays, there is a lot of commandments that are not applicable. How are we going to go and fix all that part of our body that is not going to be applicable? I put it here. Listen to this. There is, I don't remember where I wrote this. Okay, I'll say it by heart. There is, out of the 613 commandments, how many do you think are applicable nowadays? 40? Oh, yeah, that was a really low blow. Yeah, a little bit higher. Huh?
200 something.
So there's 300. Right. So there's 369. There's 369 that is applicable nowadays, but a majority of them is only under special circumstances. What is applicable to everybody nowadays is roughly about 270, 271, 270. If what? Oh, you meant 40%? Oh yeah. That's how you know you're Jewish. Okay, so. In any case, we instead of the 613, we cut it less than half, 40%, right? We cut it so low. So now we could say, when people go and they say, "Oh, what are you gonna do with all these commandments?" Okay, relax. We don't have so many commandments. We don't have 613. We have 200 and change, 270 and change. So all of a sudden, now the question is not going to be about, "Oh, still too much." You're like, okay, whatever. Keep the 10 commandments. Well, don't say that, because that doesn't. Not good advice. So now what we have to understand is, does that mean that we're deficient? That if we cannot fix and work on our 630 commandments, that means parts of our organs, parts of our body, parts of our ligaments are not being healed, are not being fixed. We don't have the spiritual energy, so what are we going to do? So if you look at the Gemara, Megillah, page 31b, and the Gemara in Tanit, page 27b, Avraham Avinu had a conversation with God. And Avraham even goes and says, he says to God, Chas v'shalom Yisrael chotim lefanecha ve'ata osa lahem kedor hamabul. It says Avraham to God, it says, God forbid, that the Jewish people are going to go in the future and they're going to sin in front of you, and then you're going to give them like the Mabul, the flood. They're going to go and destroy the whole world, you're going to destroy them. Says God, he says, Kvar tikanti lehem seder korbanot. He says, they have korbanot. They have korbanot that they're able to, if somebody does a sin, they go into the Beit HaMikdash and they do a korban and it heals a sin. Says Avraham, that's nice and dandy, but what's going to be when the Beit HaMikdash is no longer here? What are they going to do then? They can't bring korbanot. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kol Zman shekorim behem. Whenever they read the korbanot, it's keilu makrivin lefanai. When they read the korbanot, it says if they went and they gave it before me, which means is that nowadays we don't have the ability, we don't have the opportunity to go and bring a korban. By us reading the korbanot, it's as if we gave the korban. So now we said that we're lacking in certain things. So there's a way out. Says the Gemara, says the way that is if you go and you read it. Now the question is like this: is it enough to read it? Can you just read it through it? Do you have to know it? Do you have to understand it? Do you have to study it? So let me quote for you a few sources really quickly to understand this concept because it's very, very important. Rabbeinu Bachai says that it counts as when you say it, but you have to say it with kavanah. You have to concentrate. Some people, they're praying and then they finish praying and they don't realize how they even got there. Or like sometimes you're praying and the pages start spinning and then you're like, oh, where was I up to? You don't know where to turn anymore. I'll be like, yeah, probably up to where this guy's up to. You turn around over here. So that's not kavanah. Kavanah means that you're going and you're concentrating and you know what you're talking about. You're saying it with concentration. That's what Rabbeinu Bachai says. Says the Shla HaKadosh. And Devarim, Deuteronomy, chapter 30, verse 14, it says, Beficha bilvavecha lasoto. Bilvavecha means that you have to have kavanah, you have to have concentration in the same thing. You have to have it in your heart, meaning that you understand what you're saying. The Yad Ephraim goes a step further and says not only that you have to have it with concentration, you have to understand what you're saying. The Chafetz Chaim goes and says on the Gemara Menachot, page 110a, it says whoever is osek b'torat chatas, whoever is osek means whoever is learning in Torat chatas, it's as if he gave a chatas. It's if he gave a korban chatat. Meaning that it's not enough to just read it. It's not enough to understand it. You have to learn it. You have to understand it in the depth of it. And the Ben Ish Chai says this also. It says that a person can keep all the 613 commandments if they go and they learn it. Now the question is, so this is really speaking about korbanot. This is speaking about korbanot. Does this apply? So we just gave you the Ben Ish Chai. But where can we prove, where can we say that this also applies to all the 613 commandments? Because there's many commandments. For example, a Kohen, let's leave it this way. Yisrael can't take we're not Bukharin over here, right? So everyone Kohanim? Every single person here is Kohanim, right? No? Okay. So when you're going and when you're, if you're a Kohen, you cannot keep up of what Israel does. Or if you're a Kohen, you can't keep up of Levi. If you're a man, you can't keep up of a woman. So so on and so forth. There's so many so that you can't keep. Does that still apply that if you learn the mitzvot, does it still count as if you did it? The Taz says in the pasuk in Bereshit, chapter 32, verse 5, it says, Yaakov Avinu says, Im Lavan Galti. It says Rashi over there. What does it mean, Im Lavan Galti? I lived with Lavan. Galti, if you switch the words around, it also spells Taryag. Taryag is 613. It says, Im Lavan Galti, I lived with Lavan, but Taryag mitzvah shemalti. But I kept the 613 commandments. Now the question is how? How could Yaakov keep the 613 commandments? They weren't given yet. The Torah wasn't given yet. How was he keeping the 613 commandments? First of all, how could he keep? Was he a Kohen, a Levi, Israel, a woman, and a man? Nowadays, some people are everything, right? Because they're transgender, all gender, whatever it is, they're putting everything together. But regular, you can't go and keep all the mitzvot. There's no way. So how does it say that Yaakov kept all the 613 commandments? So it says the Taz, and says that what it means is that he was osek in it. He learned it. And he was able to learn it. He was able to derive what other commandments were going to be given. And he was able to learn it. By learning it, and not even doing it, by learning it, he was able to go and it counts as if he kept the Taryag mitzvot. It's going to be a little bit late. Okay. The Sefer Tam V'das of Moshe Sternbach goes and says like this. And says, on the pasuk in Genesis chapter 32 verse 5, the same one, it says that V'tayag mitzvah shamarti. What is shamarti? Shamarti means guarded. It's like the idea we have Yaakov Avinu when Yosef went and told Yaakov Avinu about his dream. It says Va'aviv shamar et hadavar. What does that mean? He guarded it. He yearned for it. He wanted it for it to happen. He was waiting for it to happen. He yearned it. What does it mean v'shamalti? Shamalti means that when it says that Yaakov Avinu tayag mitzvah shamalti, I guarded, I watched this tayag mitzvah, means that he yearned it. He wanted to go and do the 613th commandment. But we know there's a very, very interesting concept in Judaism that if you want to do something, I mean it's beyond your ability to do it, it's counted as if you did it. So if you have an opportunity that comes into you, or if you don't have the opportunity, but you really, really want to do the mitzvah, but what can you do? You can't. You really, really want to build the yeshiva. And if you had the money, God knows that you would go and pay for it. But you can't. You don't have the money now. So it counts as if you did it, which means as if you're trying to do something, but it's beyond your reach to do it. It counts as if you did it. So we so far said two things and how you go. And number one, if you learn the mitzvot, it's counted as if you did it. Number two, if you yearn to do the mitzvot, you want to do the mitzvot, it also counts as if you did it. Number three, you could also go and if you encourage and assist other people to do mitzvot, it also counts as if you did it. That's why husband and wife, they could share the mitzvot. The wife goes and says to the husband, go learn Torah. And the husband says, okay, now I want you to go buy modest clothes. I'll pay you, go, here's extra $1,000, depending on whoever living here, $5,000, $500, I don't know, I see different faces, or whatever it is. Whatever the price level is, here's the money, go buy more modest clothing. Go buy this. So they're going over here and they're helping and they're encouraging and they're assisting others, so you get the mitzvah, together. So that is how we go, and we're able to nourish our body, our soul, with mitzvot that we don't have the ability to go and to accomplish. Now, there's something very interesting, says the Shem Shmuel in Shavuot. He goes and says something like this. He says that the luchot, they were 6 tfachim long. So this is a tefach. So it was 6 of these long. It says 2 tfachim Moshe Rabbeinu was holding. 2 tfachim God was holding, and the middle was left with ear. Now, what does that mean, says the Shem Shmuel? It says anything, any action, any mitzvah that you do, mitzvah or sin, you could break it down to 3 categories. It's either one or a combination of these 3 categories. It's either action, thought, or speech. Mitzvah, sin, anything is either a combination or a single one of those. I'll give you an example. For example, you have the thought you have to believe in God, right? That is something that Anochi Hashem Elokecha. There's one God that has happened in your thought. In action, for example, you have lulav, you have etrog, you have matzah, you have the 4 cups of wine. These are things that are action. Then you have speech. You have to. There's an obligation. They have to verbally remember the Shabbat, for example. You have an obligation not to say lashon hara. This is based off the speech. All the mitzvot are either a combination or a single one of these things. Now, an action is 100% in a person's realm. He can decide whatever he wants to do, and he's going to go and he's going to do it. The thought, on the other hand, is like beyond the grasp of even. Have you ever thought about this? If you could only conjure up thoughts, you could make yourself think certain things, but you can't prevent unwanted thoughts from coming in. There's sometimes, and for example, if I just tell you right now, a ball of fire rolling down a mountain that is snowing. So some of you will sort of picture that, because I could just introduce thoughts into your head without you wanting, no, I don't want to think about it. And the more that you try not to think about it, you're going to be thinking about it, right? No, I'm not. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. I'm not thinking about a rolling ball of fire. The more you try not to, the more you're actually going to go and you're going to do it. Why? Because thoughts is beyond our realm. We could control our actions, but our thoughts is very difficult to control. What about speech? Speech works in the in-between status. Says the pasuk in Mishlei, chapter 16, verse 1. It says, "La'adam ma'akei lev." For a man, the preparations are in the heart, but me'ashem ma'anei lashon. But the tongue answers from God, which means you could prepare. You're going to say something, and you're going to go over there, and you have your whole thing, and you come and you're stumbling over your words, and you don't know what you're saying. You're like mumbling, and you could have a whole presentation set up, and you're going to come. Everything is perfect. You come over there, and you flop the whole thing. Why? You started speaking fast. You started speaking slow. You started speaking this. God, you can control it, but at the end of the day, God, the tongue answers from God. But, says the Shem Shmuel, says, this is what it meant by Moshe Rabbeinu was holding 2 tefachim. God was holding 2 tefachim, and the middle tefachim was in the ear. Moshe was holding 2 tefachim, that is resembling action. Those are things of action, because that's in human realm. God was holding the thought process, because that is not in our realm. But then there is a speech in the middle. The speech is sort of like the in-between stage. Says the pasuk in Mishlei. You go 2 psukim Mishlei, chapter 16, verse 3. It says, "Galel Hashem ma'asecha." If you commit your affairs to God, vayikunu machshavosecha, and your thoughts will be established. Meaning, you want to control your thoughts? The trick is to get control of your actions. When you commit your actions to God, God is going to give you the control of the thoughts as well. This is why there's an idea that what happened was that there's the midrash is very interesting, that when the Jewish people sinned, God wanted to sort of grab away the luchot, but Moshe grabbed it back. What does that mean? That means is that God said, look, You messed up on action. He says, I gave you one part, that you have action. He says, now that you messed it up, I got to take it away. He says, no, Moshe Rabbeinu, no, we can do tshuva. And he grabs it back and says, the action is bottom line. That's where you're able to base it off. Everything is an action. What we see over here is that everything is based off action. This would make now a lot of sense why the Jewish people, when they got the Torah, what did they say? Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will listen. Na'aseh means action. So they realize the level, they realize that what it is, it's only by the action. It's only by that's where you have the ability to change. We will do and then we will listen. Now we understand a little bit why there's so many commandments. There's so many commandments. We're using our action for doing. Now, granted, there's commandments and everything, but the majority of the things that we're dealing with are very, very actionable things. Even learning Torah, there's a lot of action that is involved in it. When you think about it like this, there's an idea that if, let's say, somebody is really, really wicked, but they just do good deeds all day, eventually they're going to become good. But let's say somebody is really, really, really good inside, is really thinking good things, but he's doing wicked things all day. Eventually, he's going to become wicked. The deeds, the actions affect who you are. They affect what's going on. That God gave us so many commandments, and we don't have time to think, because we started off with saying that, you know what, God gave us the commandments to make us better people. To make us better people. Well, things that you don't realize, says Rabbeinu Bachai, says that a mitzvah has an inner aspect and an outer aspect. So more of a hidden one and more of a revealed one. So when you do a commandment, so the mitzvah itself, you did the command, that's very good. But there's an inner cosmic effect that it actually changes who you are. You don't even realize it. You put on tefillin, it changes who you are. You become a better person. You dress modestly, you become a better person. It's weird. It actually puts it inside of you. I've spoken to people that, for example, they stopped listening to non-Jewish music, English music. And they said after a certain point, they felt different. They felt different. It was weird. It's like they felt completely like a different person. The answer is because it changes who you are. So when we said that you become a better person, many people think, I'll become a good person. I'll do the right thing. What's wrong with being an atheist and being a good person at the same point in time? So when you're doing the mitzvot, it's changing who you are as a person. You're changing, instead of looking at the rights and the obligation, you're no longer a person who does a good deed. Your essence is, I am going to do a good deed. And you're looking for the good deeds to do, not waiting for them to come. You understand the difference of what we're speaking about? So, this is, now we can understand, and we're finishing up shortly, now we can understand the reason why rabbis went so above and beyond when dealing with mitzvot. There was a rabbi in Syria, before ISIS, this is pre-ISIS, he went there and he was going through the shuk. The shuk is like the marketplace. And he was going in the marketplace, and he saw there, it was the day before Hoshana Rabbah. Hoshana Rabbah is when we take the aravot and we let out all our frustration on the, you have over there people. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? The aravot that you smack on the floor. You have some people, you're supposed to do it 5 times. But sometimes they get such healthy ones that they're like, you see that this is like wrestling. They're jumping off chairs and they're like, they're putting it on the floor because they want to get as much as they can. It's 5 times that all you need to do it. And people think that you go, and what do? You're going to go and you're going to release all your anger of the thing. Like, I spend so much money on this stuff and I can't believe I can still doing this. And why are we even smacking on the floor? It makes absolutely no sense. You're letting all your anger, on these things, and you take it out. This is day before Hoshana Rabbah. He's going, and by the way, the lulav and the etrog and the hadasim and aravot, when you're shaking it, Hoshana Rabbah is the last day. So it's the day before the last day. He's going, this big rabbi, he's going and he's walking the marketplace. He wanted to buy aravot to smack on the floor. And he's going, and he goes and he finds, this vendor. And the vendor is selling aravot, but also on the side he has some etrogim over there. So he's looking over there. He finds one etrog that's beautiful. He's never seen such a beautiful etrog before. It's like everything is so amazing, so perfect. And he's like, wow, this must be worth so much money. And he's like, I gotta have it. So he takes out his wallet, he starts counting big bills out. So he figures it's worth, a few hundred, I don't know what is it. So the merchant tells him, says, Rabbi, he says, tomorrow this is gonna be worth 50 cents. He says, I can't charge you for one day mitzvah, come on, you can't. Says the rabbi, what are you talking about? He says, this is worth everything for that one day mitzvah. Many people think, okay, it's coming towards the end of the mitzvah, so okay, what's the big deal? I don't need to spend so much anymore. The thing's over here. Says the rabbi, no. Over here, it's worth so much. What's the difference if I'm doing it once or I'm doing it 7 times? It doesn't make a difference. And he went and he paid full price for that. He paid full price for it because he knew the value of the mitzvah. The mitzvah changes who you are. It nourishes your spirituality. It nourishes your physical aspect as well. I want to finish off with one final story. There's a true story happened in Israel. There was a person who was in charge of, he worked in a bank and he was in charge of the safe deposit box. And over there at the beginning of the story, he brings down very, very interesting, stories on, what you have to deal with the safe deposit box, because it's a lot of privacy. A person comes in there, you have one key, he has the other key, and you go over there and you go to a room and you do God knows whatever you want to the box, you put whatever limbs you want in there, and then you go back over there, no one looks, no one asks any questions, government doesn't ask any questions usually, and they put it back inside over there. So, part of the thing is you can't ask any questions. People come, are very odd, very interesting, but, part of the deal is the privacy. One day he walks in and he says the story, when he was saying the story, 4 years ago this happened. He says that 4 years ago there was a known beggar that walked into the bank. He wanted to open up a safe deposit box. He had the money, so they can't ask any questions. The full beggar outfit, BO, ripped clothes, the full spiel. And he goes and he wants to open up a safe deposit box. What's the beggar going to put? All right, fine, he had the money, he put it, they opened up a safe deposit box. The beggar goes into the room, puts something inside, comes out and says, I want a deposit over here. Fine. They deposit about it. The next day, the beggar walks in, bright and early, right when they open up, and he says, I would like to withdraw something from my safe deposit box. So that's fine. They take it out, they sign, do the whole spiel, and he leaves. A few hours later, he comes back, and he says, I want to deposit something in the safe deposit box. He says, okay. He goes back again, back and forth. This happened day in and day out for 4 years. 4 years is every single day that the bank was open. Now, this guy was going out of his mind. He's like, what is this guy doing? And he started thinking, it's like, you have time on your hand when you're working in the safe deposit box, right? So you're going over there and he's thinking, he says, if this guy is going and he's depositing, maybe, at the end of the day, I understand that he comes back to the bank, he deposits whatever he collected. He went and he, and deposited back into the bank. But what does he take me out in the morning? What does he take me out in the morning that he needs to come here early in the morning? And it bothered him, but he, whatever, he couldn't say anything. This goes on for 4 years. All of a sudden, like any good union, they decide to go on strike. They go on strike, and the bank is closed. And the beggar gets up over there. He walks into the bank, and he sees the bank is closed. So he's like, I need to get to my safe deposit box. So I'm sorry, the bank is closed. There's nothing to talk about. So he goes, and again, this story can only happen in Israel because I don't know how. He calls up the guy in the house, the guy who was in charge of the safe deposit box. He calls him up, and he says, hi, this is Shmuel the beggar. I don't think he called himself Shmuel the beggar, whatever. I don't think he says, hey, this is Shmuel. I come for you every day. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, I need to get my safe deposit box open. I need to take something out. So the guy who's in charge of the safe deposit says, I don't know if you are aware of it, but it's a strike. Strike means we don't work. I can't. And he says, please, it's very imperative. I really need to go. I really need to go take something out. It's very imperative. Please, can you open it? And the guy says, that doesn't work that way. I can't. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't help you. And then they're arguing back and forth. They're on the phone for quite some time. Back and forth. Please, I need it. No, I can't. I need it. Finally, the beggar says, I'm coming to visit you. Click. Now again, only in Israel, because 20 minutes later, he gets a knock on his front door. How did he find this information? I don't know. But he got it. He goes, he opens up. Oh, behold, the beggar's over there. And he says, and the guy says, listen, I told you before, I can't. The beggar changed his tone. He said, listen, he says, I understand your situation. He says, let me at least tell you my story. And then you could decide for yourself. So this piqued his interest. So he says, you know what, okay, fine, come in. He brings him in, he puts it down, by the table, gives him a glass of drink, and the beggar starts telling a story. He says, he came from the Holocaust, and when he was in the Holocaust, he got very close to a Hasidic Rebbe, a very big rabbi that was in the Holocaust also. Now, he didn't grow up in a Hasidic, environment, but he became very, very attached to this rabbi. Just everything about this rabbi attracted him to him, and he became very attached to it. One day, one of the rabbi's helpers was asking people around if they have a pair of tefillin. The rabbi, whatever tefillin was, he wasn't able to put it on anymore, whatever he used until this point. Now, he was asking if anybody else was able to smuggle in a tefillin. Now, most people did not have tefillin. People that did have a tefillin, they did not want to tell other people. They kept it hidden because, if somebody was found with wearing tefillin, that's like a death sentence. So, they were asking around, and everybody either said no or no. And finally, they go to him and says, do you have by any chance a pair of tefillin? The rabbi wants to do it. He says, yeah, I actually do. And he goes and he gets it and he says, here, you can give it to the rabbi. And he says, excellent. So the rabbi's helper says, listen. He says, we'll meet here at later this evening and I'll return the tefillin to you. He says, fine, good. He goes, he gives them the tefillin, they both part their ways. A few hours go by and the beggar and his crew, whoever he was with, all of a sudden they got a new order that they had to go to build a railroad in a far out place. And they were transported to a far out place. Now, unfortunately, the way, in the concentration camps, you didn't work from, 9 to 5, and then you had breaks, and they worked from morning until night, and then they didn't want to waste time bringing them back to the bunk, so they slept outside. They slept outside until they finished, and then until they finished the project. So he was stuck there for a few weeks. He finally gets back, so he wasn't able to make the rendezvous point with the rabbi's assistants to go bring back his tefillin. He comes back a few weeks later, and the people around him says, the rabbi's students and the rabbi's himself, he kept on coming around. They were looking for you, and they were looking for you. And we said, listen, they got transported, they got moved. I don't know, we don't know where they went. So the rabbi was thought maybe, we all thought maybe you were gone already. Usually when you leave, you don't come back. So the rabbi took your name, but they kept on asking you, maybe go over there, see if you can find them. They do want to give you something. She says, yeah, I know what it's about. He says, not a problem. And he goes and he makes his way to the rabbi's section. And when he gets to the rabbi's section, he realized that just a few days prior to that, the rabbi got shipped somewhere else. So what are you going to do? He didn't have that, and he forgot about the whole idea. After they were liberated from the concentration camp, he decided he lost his entire family. He was the only sole survivor that he decided he was going to make an aliyah. He was going to go to Eretz Yisrael. He was going to go to Israel. And in Israel, part of the package was that he got to Israel, he gets a small apartment, and you get a little stipend, a little money to spend. And because of all the trauma that he went through, he went a little bit out of his mind a little bit, and he had to be admitted into a psychiatric unit. And he was there from 1948 until the mid-1950s. Until one day he gets a letter from America. And the letter from America says, is this so-and-so? And then he starts saying, did you at one point give this rabbi, your tefillin back in the concentration camp, in this concentration camp? And he looks at it and he brings it back and he says, yeah, that actually is me. And he writes back, he says, yeah, that is actually me. And, corresponds back and forth. Finally, he gets a letter back and he says, this is the rabbi that took it. He says, I want to return your tefillin. He says, please, I want you to bring you into America. I want to go and want to make a whole, think about it. Please come. And the guy says, he told him the situation. He's in the psychiatric unit. The rabbi goes, and from that day on, he kept on getting visitors almost daily. The rabbis, Hasidim would come from that area. They would go and they would go visit him. And because of the visiting that he came, it helped him so much that a few weeks later, he got discharged from the hospital. He got discharged from the hospital. The rabbi sent him a ticket to fly to America. He comes into America, and they make a whole thing about it. All the Hasidim come to the synagogue, and they make a big meal out of it, and then the rabbi says a big speech, and then, says what happened, and then he's presenting the tefillin, and he goes to him, and he tells him, listen, he says, when you were gone, and I couldn't return this anymore, I said, I didn't know what to do with the tefillin. He says, I didn't want to leave it without order, so this were my personal tefillin that I used for the past, X amount of years, until now I could finally return it to you. He says, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Everybody was crying, everybody was saying it. And he says, and here's the tefillin. He says that I wanted, because of the thing that you did to me, you could stay here, we'll cover everything that you need. You're welcome to stay here as much as you want. And the guy says, I appreciate your offer. He says, my home is in Israel. He says, I need to go back. He stays there a short while later, and then he makes his way back to Eretz Yisrael. He gets to Israel. He doesn't feel 100% yet. He checks himself back into the psychiatric unit. He stands there, a short amount of time until he feels he's better. He goes out, and then he goes out into the real world, and, unfortunately, the only thing that he was left for him to pick up as a profession was begging. And he would beg for money. And that's what he would do. And this is the story that the beggar is telling the guy who runs the safe deposit boxes. And he says, for the past, X amount of time, says, this was my prized possession. These tefillin that the rabbi was able to use, that the rabbi took from the Holocaust. He says, these were my prized possession. He says, 4 years ago, my home was broken into. They stole everything. And he says, I didn't really care, the money. I didn't have that much. I didn't really care for what they stole. He says, but they could have stole my tefillin. He says, that I couldn't have it. He says, from that day on, I decided I'm depositing into the safe deposit box. He says, every morning I come in and I take out the tefillin and I put it on. In the evening, before I close it back in the safe deposit box, I can't have it stolen. He says, now you see my situation, and now you can see why I need to have it. I didn't put on tefillin yet today. Please, can you go get it and help me put on this tefillin? The guy says, with his tears choking, he says, give me a sec. He made a few phone calls. Needless to say, the safe deposit box was open. Like I said, the story happened in Israel, so this could all very well be. And he goes over there, and now he's started building a connection with this guy. It happens his name was Shmuel. This Shmuel the beggar, he happened to build a connection. Now, when Shmuel would come at the end of the day, sometimes they would sit and they would chat and they would speak to each other and they would, discuss different things, and they became close. To the point that he started inviting the beggar into his house for Shabbat meals and for Yom Tov meals, and they started getting close. Years go by, and they have a very, very close relationship. Suddenly, one morning, Shmuel doesn't show up for his tefillin. And he realized there's something going on over here. He says, what's going on? Why? Something is wrong. It was past noon over there. He calls his friend and says, listen, this is this guy's address. Please go check on it. Something is off. His friend goes into the apartment and he realized something was off. Shmuel returned his soul to his maker. And that's why he didn't come to show up to get his tefillin. So they called him back and he started arranging. He called the Hasidim, he called the rabbi from America. They arranged with all the Hasidim to make a funeral. In Israel, they go, this is known as a met mitzvah. It's a funeral that he doesn't have any family, he doesn't have anything. They would go around in the street and microphone and announce if anybody's able to join in this mitzvah of burying this dead who doesn't have anybody else to come and give him the honor of being buried. And they were able to fill several busloads from the place, and they went and they traveled to the funeral place for this to give this guy a proper burial. And this, person who works in the safe deposit box is sitting over there and he's listening to the eulogies. Now, nobody knows. Everybody says, he was a nice guy. The Hasidim spoke a little bit about what happened in the Holocaust and the rabbi. But the guy from that, he says, they don't know him. They don't know what he was doing. So he goes and he says, I need to say something. He says, I want to eulogize him. He wasn't a talker. He gets up over there and he starts telling him the entire story. The entire, situation. He says, he came over to me one day and he says the whole story that I just told you. And then he goes on and he says, I asked this person. I asked this guy, this Shmuel, and I said, why don't you at least put your money that you collect, put it inside also? Because he said, one time he showed me the tefillin. I saw that's all he had inside the safe deposit box. He had nothing else. I asked him, put some extra money, but you have money anyways. Put it inside of there so you can save. So the beggar says, to be honest with you, he says, I don't have that much money. It wasn't a surprise because he was begging. But he says, any money that I beg, he says, I keep the minimal for me. And anything extra, what I do with it is I buy tefillin for immigrant children that don't have money to buy tefillin. And he says, so I'm not left with with anything left to actually put inside the safe deposit box. And the people says, do you understand what tzaddik this person was? What this person went through? And he gave them the full eulogy, and they, it was a very, very emotional funeral, especially for people that never even knew this person. A few days go by, and he gets a call from a lawyer that they're reading the last will testimony of this beggar, and he is to be included in it. So he says, fine. He goes to the lawyer's office, and they start reading off. He didn't have a lot of possessions, and he started reading off. Says to the apartment that he owned, he's donating that to the psychiatric unit for all the help that they did for him. He said from the money that he had left over, and the tefillin, he's giving it to this guy who works at the safe deposit box. And the guy was very, that's unbelievable. That's like a crazy thing to give. And in the will, he said that the money that I have, he says, I want you to, build for me a tombstone, because tombstones are expensive. The rest of the money is also this person's, belongs to this person that works in the safe deposit box. So he goes and he was going to build him his tombstone. And what he put on his tombstone was 3 words: the tefillin man. That's all that he was known, the tefillin man. And he went and they made him a very, very nice tombstone and put it over there. Now what he did with the rest of the money, this person who worked at the bank, he went and he started a fund. And that fund was to help people who can't afford for tefillin. He would go and he would help people buy tefillin. Then he inherited the third thing, which is the name, the tefillin man, which he also took from him. We see what people go through for a mitzvah when they realize the importance of a mitzvah. Everybody should have one thing that they're connected to. One mitzvah out of the 613 to be like, this is mine. This is what I do. Tzitzit is what I do. Whatever it is, challah, this is what I'm going to do. They should have something that you connect to. Because when you connect to that, it puts it on a whole nother level. You're able to connect it. You're able to put it. It's the personalization. That's how you combine it. Now we started off, we said, why? Let's do a quick recap and we'll finish. We started off, we're saying, why is there so many commandments? Why does God want from us? Can't we just relax? And the answer is no. You can't. Why? Because God knows you. And if you start relaxing too much, and if you start going, you're not going to end up doing your purpose of being over here. You're going to be like that merchant who is, instead of doing all the business, is going to go waste his money on all the nonsense and the knowledge guy. So God put us all this mitzvot to make us better people. Because not only the mitzvot make you a better person, that you can't get angry, you can't steal, and you have to be nice, you have to do chesed, you have to go visit the sick. But not only that, it changes who you are as a person. It changes who you are inside. It feeds your spirituality. Each and every single one of the 613 commandments has the ability to change who you are. And even the commandments that we can't do, you still have the ability to get that power by learning about it. And that's what you guys did. You guys went and you learned through the 613 commandments. Now I hope, is now you do it again, the second cycle, and this time you go and delve it a little bit more. You learn it and you learn it and you learn it. You're going to be able to produce such a connection to those mitzvah. You're able to understand it, and you realize the true connection that you could have from these commandments. Besides the fact that when you do a mitzvah, that you have a little inkling of understanding of why you do the mitzvah, you could connect to that better. You have the ability to connect to it. So B'ezrat Hashem, we not only be able to just learn the 630 commandments, but we're able to have the Bet HaMikdash b'meher b'yameinu, that God will be able to, not only will we learn it, we'll be able to actually do all the mitzvot and actually fulfill the 630 commandments the way that we are supposed to.